Welcome to the Tarot Tapestry, a weaving of self-discovery, where three tarot mavens put their heads and hearts together to offer their wisdom and insights about the tarot. We hope that you find this helpful in your personal journey to self-discovery and growth.
Join us as we explore ways to use tarot for self-reflection and self-correction.
Together, we'll discover new ways to use tarot to weave threads of understanding into the tapestry of your life.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Tarot Tapestry. And today we are talking about the 10's in the deck, the number 10, which is the culmination of the number cards in each suit. And it's very interesting to me. I have pulled out the cards in my traditional Rider-Waite deck, and I'm also comparing them today because I've been working with the Thoth deck this month, which is structured the same way, but each Minor Arcana card in this deck has a keyword that's on the card. And I thought those words for these cards would be very interesting. So that's where we are today. And I'm just going to jump right in and start talking about the 10 of Wands, and Angie and Kate can jump in with other things anytime they want to. So here we go. When we look at the 10 of Wands in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we have a young man, or he seems to be young, but his head is kind of buried in this pile of wands that he has his arms around. So he's got 10 of them. He's trying to pick them up off the ground. He seems to be very overburdened. It could be that they're heavy. They seem to be pretty straight. They seem to be pretty straightforward. He's just got a burden. He's got a load of wands he's trying to carry. And in the Thoth deck, it's really interesting because the word that goes with the card is oppression. And in the Thoth deck, the Minor Arcana cards do not have people in them. They're just pip cards. So this card shows 4 wands going left to right, crossed over, 4 wands going right to left. And in the front of those are 2 bigger wands sort of imposing, as if they're there to stop the action of these other wands. So they're pushing against these. They're bigger and they're able to push against the 8 other wands. So i.e. oppressing them. So for me, the 10 of Wands is kind of always about those times when you just have kind of taken on too much, or people are giving you too much or trying to get you to take too much. And either you need to put some things down, you need to set up a boundary and say, I can't take any more, or learn how to delegate. I'll do this, but I need you to do this and I need you to do that because I can't do everything or carry everything or hold on to it because I've just got too much on my plate. And that's kind of where I go with the 10 of Wands.
The other thing that I think of when I see the 10 of Wands is like resistance. Like, where do you feel like you're swimming upstream? And sometimes it can mean, you just got to power through because like you're just about there. This is like how you are going to decide to deal with that resistance. Like you were saying, are you going to delegate? Are you going to say, I'm not going to do the whole thing right now. I'm going to put some of these down right here and then I'll come back for them.
Liken it to getting back from the grocery store and you want to get all your groceries in and you're just tired of messing with them, try to get them all on your arms or whatever and carry them all in because you just don't want to make that trip back. But sometimes if you're dealing with eggs and delicate things, you might have to take those in first and then come back and get the rest.
And can you, I missed how you said the 2 of Wands in the, the 2 of Wands in the forefront were laid out. Were they laid out like an X?
No, it's not 2 of Wands, it's 2 wands. So there's 8 wands in the back and they're crisscrossed.
Right.
But these other 2 wands, and I'll show you so you can see it, but the other 2 wands are bigger. And so they're covering, almost like blocking the other wands because they're bigger and they're
Okay.
taller and, you know, heavier. And so they're like stopping the rest of these wands because they have more strength, more power, whatever you want to say. But the oppression, it's like the king, the queen are oppressing the people, kind of, if you want to look at it that way. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
it made me, when you first said it, it made me think of the two fours, right? And we know that fours are stability and security, and these other two standing in front of them and blocking them. You know, when you think about oppression, you know, it made me think about how our security has been, or our stability has been affected, you know, by these wands. Like, I was also thinking about like the Eight of Wands and how it's like a moving um fast moving energy, you know,
yeah,
and sometimes that fast moving energy can just be too fast that you get caught up in everything that is going on. And now you're like off balance and you're not feeling so maybe secure and stable in the things that you're pursuing, you know, and then you get to the 10 and it's like those two wands are there, like blocking you, saying, whoa, you need to slow down because right now things are not so stable, things are not so secure. You know, you kind of need to stop and reassess and say, okay, what is going on here? What do I need to put down? What do I need to keep going? What might I need to just put on the back burner for a while? So I really like that.
yeah. The other thing that makes me think of it is because of the word oppression and because of the climate that we're in politically and whatever. It makes me think. It makes me think of the people with the few people with more wealth and power are controlling and oppressing many, many more people population wise than they would be able to literally control physically. Okay. If 100,000 people showed up outside the White House and surged on the White House, there's nothing that anybody in the White House could do about that, short of literally dropping a bomb from the air. But people don't do that. They think they don't have any power. They think that they're helpless because they're told that, because they're being oppressed by these bigger people or more powerful, wealthy people, and they believe it. But that's the other thing about the Ten of Wands is I think it's what you believe about being overwhelmed and what you believe that you have to carry, that you have to take on as a mother, as a woman, as an employee, as a whatever. You know, I have to take this on because that's my job. Is it? Is it your job to be oppressed or be overwhelmed or be so loaded down that you don't have a life? Is that your job? And that calls for, you know, a lot of rethinking and a lot of putting up boundaries and being willing to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to myself. And you're going to have to figure out how to make it work without me doing that. Nothing like jumping off into a light topic.
Yeah. Should we do the cups next? Because that's
Well,
a more,
I have them kind of laid out this way
yeah.
because when we were talking about this earlier before we got started recording, is that how these cards are really clear in having two cards that are pretty heavy and two cards that are lighter and more hopeful, I guess you would say. So when we move to the Ten of Cups, it's very light and airy and colorful and sweet. We have a family that the husband and again, traditional deck, husband and wife, we assume we're standing behind them. So we're looking at their backs, but they're looking at a sky, and the husband's on the left, and he has his left hand up and has his arm around his wife, and she's got her right hand up. And in the sky, there's a rainbow, and it's a rainbow of cups. And on the other side of them, their little kids are kind of dancing around on the ground like, oh, we're having a good time. And so it's just sort of like they've married, they fell in love, they got married, they had two kids. Now they're they're standing on this land that could be their land with a house and a stream, and they're looking up at this rainbow, and they've sort of like reached the end of their rainbow and found their pot of gold. And the Thoth cup, or the Thoth card, again, it's 10 cups. There's kind of like 3 at the top, 3 on a second layer, and then 3, and then one final at the bottom, and they're kind of all flowing down into each other. But the word is satiety, and so you're satiated. And satiety, to me, is there's a medical term called early satiety, which means that you get full and you don't eat very much, and it can be a symptom of a gastrointestinal problem, which doesn't really relate to this, but it just makes me think of it, because we don't use the word satiety very often in normal conversation. Maybe you can say I'm satiated or whatever. Most people don't say I'm satiated, they say I'm full. So it's just a word that kind of doesn't, it's not in common conversation. But to me, when I hear the word satiety like that, I also tend to think of gluttony, which is overconsumption. And the card here, the Rider-Waite 10 of Cups, is a sweet card. It doesn't indicate that these people are taking more than they need or don't deserve what they got, any of that. But I just also feel like, because even living in this country, even the way it is right now, we are still richer than so much more of the world. And I feel like that we get caught up in what we could lose or what we're losing, but we also are better off than so many people. Even with all the silliness that's going on in the world, in this country, we are better off than a lot of people. And so I think when we reach that kind of that position of fullness or position of having enough, that it's kind of important that we figure out some way to share that, whether it's donating money or whether it's volunteering at a shelter or whatever you do. It can be online, it can be maybe you volunteer at your library, maybe you go work at the library bookstore, anything like that, but just some way to give back to your community. I think that's really important.
I agree. They look like they're very open, and like this is just the point right before overflow. Like everything is enough is enough. They've got everything they could need, and now they can be happy and share, like you said, in their community. And that really does make you feel emotionally fulfilled.
And I think the fact that the cups are in a rainbow, because everybody can see it. I mean, the rainbow, it's not, you can't contain a rainbow to your own yard. If there's a rainbow in the sky, everybody's going to see it. So that's kind of like, we're going to share the wealth to the community. So that's cool. Yeah.
I like that too. It made me think about obviously it's a 10, and it reminds me of the Wheel of Fortune, where things change, right? So you're right now, that family in the card is in a state of happiness, of fulfillment, of things are going really well. And eventually it's not gonna remain that way forever, right? Things come up in life. But what I loved about that card too is showing a family, or the mom and the dad mostly, because this affects adults, is being in the present moment and just sitting with what you have in front of you right now, where in that card it's their children who are playing, and you're just sitting there and you're so present in the moment that you like sort of put out you filter out all of the other stuff that's going on around you to just experience the moment. And I think that is something that's very difficult for adults, especially in our society where everything is go go go, and you have to think about what's my next move, what's my next move. So I like how that card, and they're just sitting there and they're just peaceful and they're really enjoying it, and they're just even saying to the self, we created this.
Mhm.
We did this by showing that love and compassion in our relationship to our children. And, we have every right to sit and admire what we have in front of us because we did this. So it's sort of like, again, and I think going back to the Wheel of Fortune, I think it was the Wheel of Fortune, you're
Yeah,
proud of yourself for what you've done and you're recognizing that. Yeah.
absolutely. And I love that because that's like they're coming, and maybe they went through a lot of stuff and maybe they did put some things down so that they could, that wheel could come up and take them to the top of the wheel, and they're having that moment of enjoyment. And I think that we don't take the time to be appreciative, not even so much grateful, but just to be appreciative, just to appreciate what we have, and just say, okay, I'm not gonna listen to the news about this or blah, blah. I'm just going to be in my house and I'm going to like my furniture and I'm going to enjoy my kitchen and I'm going to look out my back door and enjoy what's out there and just be in that moment because I have the things that I need and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
There's one other thing. So I'm using the deck, the Good Fortune Tarot. And so the 10 of Wands and the 10 of Cups is showing a sequence. So in the 10 the 10 of Wands, there is a tree house and there is a man who's walking. He's got a bundle of wands or sticks on his shoulder, and he has a half-built treehouse with some stairs. So he's carrying this and he's walking over, and then you get to the 10 of cups, and the same man is sitting there with his wife and children with the completed treehouse in the tree that
Oh,
now
that's
his
cool.
children are enjoying. And it's beautiful because it also
Yeah.
shows in the 10 of wands maybe a bit more of a positive twist to it, where sometimes your hard work and your passion to do things works out, and
Yeah.
what you do now and the amount of energy and effort that you put into something now, even though sometimes it can feel like you might feel overburdened or just very stressed out, in the end, it can be a wonderful thing, and that will bring joy, to your family or other people. So hard work does lead to times of enjoyment and being present. And as a reminder that with all the hard work that you do, to take the time to appreciate what you have accomplished, in your lifetime.
I really love that, Kate. And you can kind of do that with the RWS too. Like maybe that guy's lugging wands to build that house that you see out in the
That's right.
distance in the 10 of cups. And then we come to the 10 of swords, which is a
Oh,
little less happy. This is
yes.
also, in my opinion, about cycles, but this is about when you know you have done everything you can towards a certain end and it's just not going to happen. It's just not. I'm sorry, but you will rise again. Like you can see in the RWS, the person who's got 10 swords along their back is lying on their stomach with their head turned toward the sunrise.
Right.
um
And the card in the Thoth deck is interesting. It's called Ruin.
hmm.
And I kind of chuckle at this because my dad, who was kind of a pessimist, he was pretty pessimistic in his life. But whenever something would happen around the house, or he would just he would say, "Oh, ruined." That's
Oh no.
his word. So ruined. Like, oh, the car got a flat tire, or you got it. Oh, ruined. And
Mm.
so when I hear the word ruin, again, another word that you don't say that often, it just makes, for some reason, it makes me chuckle. I'm not happy that somebody has a bad thing happening, but it just brings up that memory. But in this card, it's really interesting with the swords. The swords are all pointing, again, no person. There's a heart, not in the very center, kind of on the lower center of the card. Um, and the swords are all kind of pointing inward towards that. But here's the thing, the points of all the swords are bent backwards. So they're not piercing the heart. They're kind of somehow, and the heart kind of has like an energy field around it. So the heart has somehow figured out how to thwart being pierced, which I think is really interesting because even though it says ruin, it's not death. It's ruin, and we can experience a feeling of ruin whether we lose money, whether we have a breakup, whether we lose a job or whatever, feel like things have ruined, that our castle has fallen or whatever. But yet, if we are not dead and we're not pierced, we can recover and be resilient and get back on our feet. So this poor person with all the swords in their back is probably, it's a new day. Like you said, he's looking towards the sunrise, and at some point those swords are going to come out and he's going to get up.
Yeah, and if you get this card when you're doing a reading for yourself or for someone else, and nothing nothing has clearly happened yet, like this can be a slow your roll. What are you doubling down on? What are you being self-righteous about? What are you being dogmatic about? Where are you being inflexible about your beliefs or your attitudes or your behaviors in the world? Like, what do you need to stop doing right now? And maybe you can avoid the part where you get knocked on your butt. I never do. I never take hints. I'm very, I'm not good with subtlety, you know, but I'm a little bit stubborn. So this is always a good reminder for me when I see this card to be like, where am I, where am I pushing a little too hard that I should like back off of or lighten up on.
Yeah.
I really like that looking at it that way. It's like a little foresight, a little yeah, like hey, stop what you're doing and it's time to do a little more thinking about what's going on. I had when I saw the card and you were describing it, Linda, from the Thoth deck. I My first words that came to me was rock bottom. Kind of like sometimes, and that's like a big sobriety and thing is rock bottom, but we can hit a lot of rock bottoms in our life. And
Yeah.
sometimes, like you said, Angie, because I know from myself, sometimes I need to hit rock bottom before I can change what I do. I mean, that's my personality. I am working on it, but sometimes that's what I need. And that's what actually makes me more aware of what is going on. And then when you're down there, like I'm looking at my deck now, and it's the good fortune, and the person is just like lying there with all of these things in her head, and she's just lying flat. Like sometimes you just need that to kind of like almost be play dead. You know how like animals play dead because
Mhm.
it might prevent them from being eaten by other animals, so it's kind of like that same analogy, like you're playing dead because you just don't want to be eaten up by all of this chaos that's going on around you, and you just need some time to just like be there and feel that pain and then surrender to it, right? It's also a card of surrender. Like you're just limp, you're surrendering to all of this. And, there is such healing and such strength in surrendering. I don't think people realize that. I think people do it often, but they don't realize how much strength there is behind surrendering to what you cannot control, right? And that goes back to the 10 of, I mean, the Wheel of Fortune, right? There are things in life you cannot control, and you have to surrender yourself to that. And the 10 of swords, it's sort of like a warning, like, hey, if you don't surrender, this is what can happen, and it just yeah.
It can almost be kind of a relief, right? When you hit that point, because then you've done everything you can do. There is no more try here. We're done. We're done. Do a
Yeah.
different thing. And recover. Let all of these things heal up and learn your lessons. So you only have to do this once because
Yeah.
it's hard.
because I think relief, I think the feeling of relief is a feeling that's very underrated.
Mm,
Because when you get to this point of the Ten of Swords and you get to this point of surrender and you're kind of like, okay, I'm just going to let it be. I'm going to do whatever. And that feeling of, oh, I don't have to carry these anymore, or
right. I
I
don't
can
have to
pull this.
care about it anymore.
Yeah, that feeling is so powerful, but I think that because it's maybe a feeling that's sort of an in between, like you have all this stuff happening, you make a decision not to put it down or to surrender it or whatever you do, and you have the relief. I don't think we spend enough time there. I
Mm,
think that then we want to move on to happiness or what, and you can't always get to happiness from that point. It takes a long time. It's a process. It's like, if you're depressed and then you work on it, and then because they say, as depression is repressed anger, so then maybe you get angry, and
mhm.
then you get really angry, and then that lightens up a little bit, and it becomes frustration, and it becomes annoyance, and then it becomes hopeful, and then so you don't just go from being depressed to being happy. You have go through all these different stages. So I think people don't appreciate relief as much as they could,
And
because
it's hard to learn from your past when you won't admit the part that you played in this current pickle you find
yeah,
yourself in, and if you don't do that, if you don't, if okay, I'm depressed or I'm angry. Okay, why am I angry? Because they blah blah blah, and you just got to keep asking those questions until you go, oh, but this is the part that I did,
yeah,
because you can't do anything about anybody else ever. You cannot fix them. You cannot
yeah,
make them be um the way that would make everything easier for you. Sometimes you just have to understand what it is in you that makes you keep going and keep, button your head against that particular wall. In my experience, like I
yeah.
have I have experienced this once or twice in my life
I
about
tend to be
certain
the other
things.
way where it's just like it's all my fault. It's all my fault. And if I had
Mm,
just done this or done that,
yeah.
and not giving, I don't want to say credit, but not letting the other person or the other
Mhm.
people have their part of it, because if you're in something with other people, it's never only one person.
No. Right, exactly.
It's the big blame game, right? It's the
Yeah.
blame game,
Mhm.
the blame game that you play
And
with
and I and
others.
I have a hard time with that because I've sat in so many corporate meetings about things, or just
Mhm.
friend group, and things happen, and all they want to do is place blame, and it's just like, you know
Yeah.
what? It happened. It's too bad that it happened. I'm sorry that it happened, but let's move forward. Let's just not worry about who did what to who, and rehash it and rehash it to mush. And I just
Mhm.
can't deal with the blame. And so it's just like I'd rather just move on and say, okay, I did it. Let's just go forward.
Yeah, and the guy in the Ten of Swords, like he's all by himself, but all of the swords are in his back. So that is
Yeah,
also another
just
thing to
somebody did
keep in
something.
mind.
Exactly.
Somebody put those there.
Right.
And sometimes it's ourselves, but sometimes it's not. I didn't want to
Yeah.
imply that
Yeah.
everything is your own, I, not
Our own
everything is
actions are the only things that we have any control over, but other
exactly.
people other people do things to you
Yes.
sometimes.
But
That
the
does
only thing
happen.
you can control is how you
How you
act,
handle it.
how
Right.
you react, how you respond
Exactly.
to these things.
And what I like about this card that I was just noticing as I'm staring at it is, and you had just said, Angie, that in the RWS, all the swords are in the person's back. In this card, the swords start at her head and they go all the way down to her calves, and they're in all the parts of her body, which is also very, symbolic of when you're under that amount of stress, it affects your whole entire body. Some
Mhm.
people can become, debilitated and they can't get up, they can't walk, they feel weak. This hurts, that hurts. Like it is a full body experience
Mhm.
when you're in a state like the 10 of swords, and the woman just lying there is like just giving into all of that and just saying, I need to I need to let it go. I need to just rest, and I need to just let my body lie there like a
Yeah, because
wounded
first
animal.
you need to feel it. First, you need to feel it.
Mhm.
That is true.
Because a
Yeah.
lot of the time we just ignore it until it puts us on the ground with a backache or a cramps or just so much pain we have to feel it. And I
Yeah.
think it's another thing that you could look at the swords as is like just the physical symptoms of pain that we have sometimes when things are
I know there are
overwhelming.
some tarot readers who read more like of a medical
Yeah.
way, and swords can often talk about you might need surgery or this. I mean, obviously, this could be horrible back pain,
Yeah.
you know.
But I'm
Yeah,
Um,
thinking I
absolutely.
think more I'm thinking more of like almost
that's
like
I always
chronic
think of it as
pain or
psychosomatically caused, kind of like you are so stressed and so tense that you can't
Mhm.
relax, and it's actually
yeah.
causing the body.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that since I quit typing for a living, I won't say that I don't have any tension in my neck and shoulders. I do, but it's not anywhere near like it used to be. And I've even gone to massages and they worked on it. And it's like that's just not even the way it used to be. So and
Hmm.
it wasn't just the physical act of sitting here. It was all the other crap that I was
All the
doing
stress
too.
that came with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember.
all that. So then we move on to the ten of Pentacles, sorry. And the Ten of Pentacles is our second kind of up card. And in the Thoth deck, it's called Wealth. And it's coins. It's definitely coins, but each coin, I mean, there's a background of coins, but there's 10 coins that are highlighted. And they're different sizes, sort of, and they all have different symbols on them. There's a triangle, there's a diamond kind of and then they have like a caduceus. There's a couple of, I think they're Hebrew letters, and then there's some astrological symbols like for Venus and Mars and Pluto, I think. I don't know exactly what the symbols are, but they're different symbols. So this kind of, to me, in this particular card, says that wealth can come from many directions. And in the RWS card, it's just people are just got money all over the place. Coins are just falling out of the sky. And I have another deck that is based on the RWS, but it's called the Pulp Tarot. And it's kind of the artwork is kind of like mid-century, like movie posters, kind of, and things like that. And when I see the Ten of Pentacles in that deck, it reminds me of Mad Men, the show Mad Men, which was in the 60s, 70s, I guess, 60s maybe. And all I can think of is Don Draper in his living room with his family, because it just looks like they're having cocktails and they're just all dressed to the nines and they're in this fancy room. But this one is just in a town and they've got the man and woman is looking at each other. There's a tower, there's some dogs playing, and a guy with a big fancy cape and just pentacles just raining down out of the sky. So it's raining money in
I
this card. So it's very prosperous.
think
And
the pattern that they're laid out in is the same as the tree of life in the Kabbalah.
yeah,
Um, and this card is like about kind of like generational wealth with your legacy. Not always, I mean, this is genetics. This is fortitude and all of the things you can pass on to your children and your friends and the people in your life that love you, not just money. I i i don't think, I mean, that's not how I like to think about it. And this is a 10, like the wheel of fortune, a cycle, right? And I always see
yeah,
this as the gray-haired man that's sitting down, petting the dogs. He's the one that really started this whole ball rolling, and
yeah, the
he's kind of
patriarch.
like getting to sit down now and let the kids take over. And
Right.
you chase the dogs. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be the treat dealer now. I'm just gonna sit
Yeah,
here
the Thoth deck is actually really is in the shape of the tree of
and
life.
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
think again, like what you said, these different symbols, I think it could be like maybe you're under an auspicious
Yeah.
astrological kind of thing, or maybe you've got it, you inherited jewel, wealth, the jewels, or and
Hmm.
I don't know what these Hebrew letters mean, but it could mean something else. But again, how we define wealth, because it being wealthy and being full don't necessarily have to actually do with money or food.
Right.
It's like a full life can mean a lot of things to a lot of people.
I mean, we're seeing on the world stage right now people who have literally one of everything in the entire world that they can have, and it's still not enough for them.
Right.
That's I don't think of that when I look at the Ten of Pentacles. This is
No.
about like I said, getting out of the way, letting the next people, learn from you and being there to counsel and help if, you know, if they are open to that. And when it's positively expressed, that's what it is. It's you know, kind of a passing of the baton from one
Right.
generation to the next almost. Like
Right.
what have I learned from my parents, my grandparents, my life experience, my coworkers, my, any kind of thing where you're part of a continuum. And this is sort of the Ten of Pentacles is sort of the culmination of that. Like you're kind of at the tippy top of the wheel, I guess, if you want to talk about it that way.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
changing from uh, one who was an apprentice maybe into the one who's going to start making the decisions, but the one who taught you isn't gone. They're there
Yeah.
to, help you out if you need it.
Yeah. That to me is more like instead of a wheel of fortune, it's almost more like a spiral road where they're going up a spiral in a continuum, and the people that you might have passed the people that helped you like on the way, but they're still there. They're still traveling on their own road,
Hmm.
and you've learned from them, and so now you're kind of it's kind of your turn to lead.
My favorite iteration of this card in all of the decks that I own is the Gaian deck, and it's
Hmm.
called the Ten of Earth. And in that, it's an old man walking on a trail out of a like an old growth redwood forest, walking away from the observer. And it's um, how in those old forests, all of the new trees are are growing from the old trees that were there
Right.
before. So it's this continually sort of renewing cycle of
Yeah.
learning and growing and dying and coming back and ups and downs. And I really like this card. It's one of my favorite cards in the whole deck.
I love everything both of you are saying, and it also reminded me of, your ancestry,
Mhm.
because that is part of that's part of your DNA. That's part of, like you mentioned, Angie, it's hereditary, right? It's in your genes, and you carry that, and you um give that to your children. You pass it on. And I sort of feel very connected to this card right now in my life because I'm a new grandmother. So I
Yeah.
really do now look at my life in a way, what am I going to pass on to my grandchild? Like I worked, and I think I did fairly decent job, raising my two boys and passing down my knowledge and things that I've learned onto them. And to this day, I do see myself kind of just doing a little bit more of that, but just in a different way. And now I look at it and I'm like, okay, so what is going on with me now, and what is it that I can pass on, to my grandson? Like what kind of role model do I want to be for him? What kind of person do I want to show up for him as? And that like really makes me happy because it's also inspiring to make you feel like, not that that he's the only reason why I would do this, but it just gives you like more it like lights your fire, you know what I mean? It kind of just gives you a little bit more of a desire and a want to say, okay, you know what? There's a new one here now, and I need to kind of look at myself and say, you know, what am I going to pass on to him? How is he going to see me, you know, when he's 10 years old or when he's 18 years old, you know? And if they say, oh, you know, how did you feel about your grandmother? You know, what is he going to say? You know, and I want to make sure that like I am part of that and that
Mhm.
he has a really good experience. You know, so I love seeing that. And I also think that with the pentacles, and we were talking about that, like you said, Linda, wealth is not just money. And people who have no money can be so wealthy in
Absolutely.
other ways, you know, family, friends, um, celebrations, that feeling of joy and connectedness with other people, that's all part of wealth. And it's
Right.
unfortunate in this society that it's too much stressed that wealth is money. You have to make money to be happy. And I think we've talked about this on other episodes too, where that is just money doesn't buy happiness. You know, happiness comes from from your heart, you know,
Yeah.
and to truly be happy, you have to be connected to your heart, more so to your heart than to your brain. I
I mean,
think
a
I
certain amount of money, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. A certain amount of money,
Money makes things easier. There's nothing
it
wrong
makes
with
things
having
easier.
enough money.
It can take away worry about
Mhm.
just day-to-day
Mhm.
survival. And that's a lot of stress when you don't have, I mean, you have maybe just enough, but if there's a crisis, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Be true that, you know, there are people who don't have a lot of money and who are living paycheck to paycheck and, you know, can't afford other things. But I also think that there are times in that person's life where they do feel, you know, happy and grateful for what they have. At least I think so. You know, I mean,
I think you're
I'm
probably
not.
right. I mean, you're definitely right. I think we did a pretty great job of talking about like the better sides of the hard cards, like the 10 of Wands and the 10 of Swords. Now, what would you say about the 10 of Cups if you pulled it and it was in more like of a shadowed aspect of not so well expressed?
I think I would look at it more about where may I be draining my cups in relationships that I have? You know, where am I having issues with certain kinds of emotions that might be keeping me or preventing me from reaching a point where I can say, I feel very fulfilled in this part of my life at this moment. I've worked really hard because I think our own fears, right? And fear is a huge emotion. It gets in the way of us achieving things that we want. And it gets in the way of us being able to, like I mentioned before, to just sit there and be very present in the moment and appreciate what you have. And fear and anxiety. And that to me is your cups are spilling over. They're not
Yeah.
overflowing, but they're
There's
literally being
knocking,
knocked
yeah,
down, dried
they're
out cups.
leaking.
There you go.
Think that card 10 of Cups reversed too can be faking it to make like everything is fine.
Toxic
Everything's fine.
positivity.
I can't say that it's not fine because I'm not safe or I don't feel safe to do that. Um and then with the with the reversed pentacles, that can be sometimes you get things from your ancestors you don't want those things. Like there's a lot of ancestral pain and wounding and lots of things that just sort of like get passed down again and again and again, and nobody will ever address the actual thing and fix it and like stop it.
But I've been watching this show called The Wire. Set in Baltimore, and there was this one boy, and and his whole family, except for him, his whole family were addicts. And he would get school clothes somehow, and they would take his clothes. His family would take his clothes, and he would show up to school, and he kind of got made fun of because he wasn't always clean, and he wasn't all, he smelled, teenage boys smell. And he had this one math teacher. There's a character who's a math teacher who was a policeman. He was not, he was involved like in computer kind of stuff, and he was not really a street cop. And he got into this altercation and ended up shooting another cop and killing him. He thought he was an undercover cop, but he thought he was a drug person, but he didn't identify himself. And so he got booted off the force and became a teacher. So he's the math teacher, and he just really took to this boy. And so he set up a whole locker for him in the locker room and said, if you come in the morning, I have extra clothes, you can take a shower. And so he could be clean, and he would share his lunch. He was like, look, I brought too much lunch here, have some food. And that kind of thing is like, it's like these kids were in such an environment that they didn't even know what was possible. They didn't know. The way they were raised, and their families and their parents, maybe before them in the inner city, that's all they knew. And so it would be so hard for somebody to get out of that voluntarily. It's almost like somebody has to come in and take them out and show them in a, this is what's, you're smart, but this is possible. You don't have to stay here.
They
But
need access to resources is what
yeah,
they need.
it is just,
That's a big expression of Ten of
Yeah.
Pentacles reversed, is these things that are just, you just don't have any access. You just don't have
Right.
any access because your dad didn't have any access, and his dad didn't have any access.
right.
And his dad didn't have any access. And that's all because of, history and
Yeah.
colonialism and white supremacy and patriarchy.
All that wonderful
and
stuff.
capitalism and all of
Yeah.
this shit that we're dealing with right now. But my point is, I don't want to leave everybody on a real bummer, because that is very hard. Not a single fucking one of us can do anything to fix that problem. None of us have that sort of power to just snap our fingers and make it happen. So it's very important to get very, very clear, like we were talking when we spoke about the Wheel of Fortune, of trying to stay as close to the center of your wheel as you can, as close to know who you are. And all of these things, the good ones and the bad ones, whether they're, happy expressions or hard expressions, they're all an opportunity to learn more about yourself.
That's
And
true.
that is the only thing that you can fix. And it doesn't
very
mean
true.
that everything that happens to you is your fault. It means that you have to get clear on what you can do and what you can't, and let yourself be okay with that. You can't, like, fighting and screaming and yelling about everything that is going on right now. Yes, protest and do that, but I'm talking about when you're at home, when you are safe, when you can stop.
Yeah.
Like, stop it. Don't let it eat into you. Don't let this become who you are, because this is not who we are. It's
Right.
not. And I'm not saying ignore it. That's a terrible idea also, but understand that you can only do what you can do.
Well, and
that's
everybody's
gotta be clear.
tolerance and ability to participate and deal is different, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
From a healing perspective, that not everybody can heal and transform and take on generational, what do we call them? Generational
Trauma.
faults or
Generational trauma.
Curses,
trauma, right?
trauma.
So we all work at a different pace.
Mhm.
But that being said, I think too that there are times when you can look at what may have happened when you were growing up. And I'm using myself as a personal,
Mhm.
as an example, because I did have, in my opinion, a very traumatic upbringing. And I think a
Healing
lot of
yourself
that,
heals other people too. You being
yes,
better makes everybody you come into contact better.
Right. And I know that a lot of that had to do with me getting involved in drugs and alcohol as a means to escape everything. But there also comes a point where I have to look at what occurred and say to myself, am I going to do the same thing? Am I going to react? Am I going to do that with my own children? Or can I at some point be able to work on this and say, okay, I can't any longer blame the people that came before me, my mom, my grandmother, whatever, but I need to take responsibility now to
Yep.
do my best to try and change that.
Mhm.
And that's where we are very powerful, where we have that ability to do that. Maybe not for everything that happens, but every little thing that you can look at and say, okay, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do my best to work on healing that part of me so that don't I don't pass that on to my children. That is how you stop those generational traumas,
Yep.
right? And I
Well, I
think
look at
we
my
all have that personal power to do it. And we do need to be selective in things that we do. And doing it by yourself is not always the best of things, although there are things you can do on your own. And then there are things that are just a bit more maybe traumatic that you would need help doing so in like therapy or counseling of some sort. But yeah, that's also what I was thinking about with the Ten of Pentacles
yeah, to
reversed.
not to not pass on those things that
Mhm.
consider to be stumbling blocks or trauma or whatever. And the first step to that is to be self-aware, is to be
Yeah.
aware of the fact that, okay, I have this situation, I have this problem that I'm dealing with. Part of it comes from the fact that this is my reaction to what happened to me growing up.
So this was great,
Yeah. This was a
for
fun
the 10.
episode on the 10. Very
Yeah,
Yeah.
deep. I
So
think
the tens are powerful.
they are.
they are.
They're
They
both the end and the beginning of a cycle. They're the end of
Right,
one
Mhm.
cycle
because
and the
I was going
beginning
to
of
say
the new.
they're the culmination of the numbers through the deck, and
Mhm.
so they do represent kind of a fulfillment as you go from the ace through. But also because of the cyclical nature of things, and 1 and 0 reduces down to 1, you're back at the beginning, and
Yep,
so you have an opportunity to start over and do better.
that's right. And there's lots of
Taking all
lessons.
that knowledge
Right.
from
All
that
those
previous
lessons.
cycle with you,
As I said,
Yeah.
that upward spiraling road,
Right.
continue going the cycles, but the goal is to get higher, to get to a
Yep.
higher level.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're gonna go around in a lot of circles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A great job, ladies.
Thank
Another
you.
great
That was fun.
episode. And we will see you guys next week.
Yeah.
Tune it in.
Bye, everybody.